Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. If a woman conquers the boardroom, the charts, and the global economy, why does society still expect her to earn less than her husband?
Right. I mean, it really is the ultimate modern contradiction, isn't it?
It completely is. And today we are going to explore exactly why that happens using a really brilliant article titled The Stubborn Scarcity of Female Breadwinners.
And it's such a fascinating piece because we've fundamentally restructured how women participate in the global economy over the last few decades.
Yeah, we've seen them just smash through professional ceilings.
They absolutely have. But somehow we just haven't managed to update the psychological blueprint of marriage to match that new reality.
Right. And to really understand the mission of our conversation today, we aren't just looking at this one article.
No, we are pulling together a massive stack of sources.
Exactly. We've got decades of longitudinal sociological tracking, global surveys on marital attitudes, and deep economic analyses from institutions like the University of Chicago.
Because we want to figure out why the numbers in our bank accounts are changing. But the power dynamics in our living rooms are definitely not.
And there is honestly no better way to ground this than looking at the celebrity wedding of the decade. We have to talk about July 2026.
Oh, right. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
It is the absolute perfect catalyst for this discussion, really.
It is, because you have two people at the absolute pinnacle of their respective fields.
Yeah, when you look at them from the outside, they represent the peak of modern success.
And when you look at the math, it is genuinely staggering. I mean, Travis Kelce is by no means struggling to make ends meet.
Oh, definitely not.
He is pulling in around $50 million a year.
Wow.
Right? That's factoring in his NFL salary, his massive endorsement deals, his incredibly lucrative podcasting empire.
Which is generational wealth for almost anyone on Earth.
Exactly. But in the Swift-Kelce household, as of 2025, that staggering figure accounts for maybe a fifth of their total household income.
Just 20%.
Just 20%. Taylor Swift is the undisputed family breadwinner.
And, you know, that extreme high-profile anomaly actually shines a massive spotlight on a much quieter, everyday reality happening in households all around us.
Yeah, the Swift-Kelce dynamic kind of forces us to confront this massive cultural and economic dissonance.
Absolutely. Because women dominate the educational landscape right now, the pipeline of female talent is just overflowing.
But the traditional breadwinner dynamics?
They are stubbornly entrenched. They are refusing to budge.
It is wild when you look at the raw data on that pipeline. Today, women account for 3/5. That's 60% of all American university graduates.
60%.
Yeah, and they don't just hold the degrees either. They currently make up over half of all college-educated workers in the labor force.
So the qualifications are there?
The earning potential is there. You would naturally expect household incomes to reflect that shift.
Right. But then you look at the 2024 data for dual income couples.
And out of all those households where both partners work, only 30% of American wives actually earn more than their husbands.
Which is a stark, almost confusing contrast. I mean, all of those educational gains, all of that workforce dominance.
They just aren't translating.
Exactly. They're simply not translating into economic reality within the structure of marriage.
But if you take to the streets and ask people about this, you get a highly progressive answer.
You do. On paper, public support for female breadwinners looks incredibly strong.
Right. There was a major survey conducted in 2022 that asked Americans a very pointed question.
Yeah, they asked if a woman out-earning her husband was, quote, almost certain to cause problems.
And only 10% of Americans said yes.
Just 10%.
Which makes us sound incredibly enlightened, especially when you compare it to the rest of the world.
Oh, absolutely. That exact same survey found that 16% of people in Germany thought it would cause problems.
And in China, it was a massive 27%.
Right. So Americans are looking at that 10% figure, patting themselves on the back and saying,
hey, we have evolved. We are totally fine with this.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I have a really hard time believing that 90% of Americans are actually cool with this when the math says otherwise.
Yeah, the numbers don't add up.
Is this really a situation where fragile egos and archaic gender norms are actively holding us back? Or is it just the lingering gender pay gap doing the math for them?
That's a great point.
Because we know women still face structural pay issues, and they often choose different occupational fields, like teaching or nursing compared to engineering.
Right.
So is society just structurally paying women less, or are couples actively avoiding female breadwinning?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's actually a combination of both, but the invisible hand of personal preference is playing a substantially larger role than society likes to admit.
Okay.
We can't ignore the occupational differences, working hours, the motherhood penalty, structural pay gaps. Those absolutely drag that number down to 30%. But the core argument of this article, which is backed by a growing mountain of economic research, points to a mechanism that is much more deeply rooted.
So it's not just happening to them.
Exactly. This imbalance isn't just happening to couples, it is heavily driven by the unspoken, active preferences of the couples themselves.
Wow.
Yeah, they are making deliberate choices to maintain a very specific traditional dynamic.
So you're saying if we look closely enough at the data, we can actually see couples hitting the brakes.
Yes, we really can.
Because to prove that this is about psychological preferences and not just structural wage gaps magically aligning to keep men on top, we have to look at the exact tipping point where a wife's income threatens to overtake her husband's.
And that brings us to a really famous 2015 study.
Right, from Marianne Bertrand, a highly respected economist at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business.
That study is entirely foundational to understanding this behavior.
Why is that?
Because if this phenomenon was purely about structural issues, if it was just the natural result of women choosing lower paying fields or dealing with standard wage gaps, the data would look very different.
How so?
Well, if you mapped out wives' share of household income on a graph, you would expect to see a relatively smooth, bell-shaped curve.
Okay, so as the percentage of income gets higher, fewer women reach it, so the line should naturally gently taper off.
Exactly. But Dr. Bertrand and her co-authors discovered that it does not follow a smooth distribution at all.
Wait.
There is a massive statistical discontinuity.
Wait, so when you say statistical discontinuity, in normal English, you mean the data literally falls off a cliff on the graph instead of sloping down naturally?
Precisely. Right at the 50% mark, right at the exact threshold where the wife's income would cross over and become the primary source of household wealth, the number of couples plummets unnaturally.
That is wild. It's almost like a game of financial chicken, or like a household thermostat.
A thermostat is a great way to put it.
The couple is perfectly happy for the wife's income to heat up the house and buy the nice vacations, but the second it hits 50 degrees, the exact point she out-earns him, a psychological sensor trips and shuts the furnace off.
That is exactly what the data suggests.
But how does that actually work in practice? The data shows wives are significantly more likely to report earning slightly less than their husbands, rather than slightly more. Are these couples intentionally sabotaging her earning potential just to protect his status?
The mechanics of it are incredibly subtle, but very, very real.
So it's not some cartoonish villain demanding his wife quit her job.
No, not at all. It looks like a woman being offered a promotion that requires more travel, and the couple mutually deciding it would be, too disruptive for the family.
But she turns it down.
Right. Or it looks like a wife dropping down to a 4-day work week when they have kids, while the husband simultaneously volunteers for overtime shifts to ensure his paycheck stays just a fraction higher. Dr. Bertrand argued this pattern reflects a deeply ingrained desire among both men and women to conform to gender norms, even if it literally costs their household money.
They are willing to shrink the total size of their financial pie just to ensure the husband's slice remains the biggest.
Exactly.
I have to imagine that when Dr. Bertrand dropped that bombshell, the academic world didn't just quietly nod and agree. I mean, gaining financial security is supposed to be the ultimate goal.
Oh, the pushback was fierce.
Did economists push back on the idea that couples were intentionally leaving money on the table?
Yes. For nearly a decade, critics tried to dismantle her findings.
What did he say?
They argued that this cliff was just a statistical illusion. The main counter-argument was that the data was being warped by couples who work in the same family business.
Oh, okay.
Or spouses who work in the exact same occupation, like two public school teachers earning identical union-mandated salaries, which creates an artificial cluster right at the 50-50 mark.
Ah, so the critics tried to explain it away with technicalities. They didn't want to believe it was psychological.
Exactly.
But the article notes that the Economist actually stepped in recently to settle this debate, right?
They did.
And they didn't just run a small poll. They compiled 17 years of data from the American Community Survey.
Which is huge.
Yeah. We should clarify for you listening, this isn't just some quick internet survey. This is a massive, incredibly reliable data set managed by the U.S. Census Bureau that tracks millions of young working households.
17 years of receipts.
17 years. And what did they find when they crunched those numbers?
They unequivocally proved the critics wrong.
Really?
Yeah, the Economist data team went in and completely scrubbed the data set. They entirely removed self-employed couples, wiping out the family business argument.
Okay.
They removed spouses working in the exact same industry.
Hmm.
And they found that more than a decade after Bertrand's initial study, that sharp, unnatural break at the 50% threshold is still sitting right there.
It's still there.
The cliff is not a statistical illusion. It is a very real behavioral wall.
And the stakes of hitting that wall or daring to climb over it are incredibly high.
Very high.
It's not just about awkward conversations over the dinner table or feeling a little insecure. A recent sociological study out of France looked at what happens to a marriage when the woman completely shatters that norm and brings in around 75% of the household income.
The results were chilling, honestly.
Yeah, those couples are 30% more likely to split up than couples who earn similar amounts.
Which means, if we connect this to the bigger picture, violating this unspoken norm has severe, measurable consequences for the survival of the relationship.
Wait, so gaining more financial security as a household actually makes the marriage more fragile?
It seems that way.
That goes against everything we are taught about financial stress ruining marriages. Usually, lack of money is the #1 driver of divorce.
Right.
If breaking the norm risks a 30% higher chance of blowing up the marriage, what is actually breaking down inside the relationship when she becomes the breadwinner?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the psychological toll, because it is hitting both partners in very different ways.
How so?
The article points to corresponding studies from the US, Sweden, and Australia.
Okay, so completely different cultures with wildly different social safety nets.
Exactly, yet they all find the exact same phenomenon. Husbands who are out-earned by their wives report demonstrably poorer mental health.
And again, the sources backing this up are bulletproof.
Absolutely.
The article cites data analyzed by Joanna Serta, an economist at the University of Bath, using America's panel study of income dynamics.
And for those who don't know, the PSID is basically the gold standard in sociology.
It is. It has been tracking the same families and their descendants for generations. It doesn't just ask how you feel today, it tracks how your life changes over decades.
And the numbers they found are sobering.
Very. Men whose wives or partners are the primary earners are roughly 1.5 times as likely to report serious psychological distress.
Yes, and we need to define what serious psychological distress actually means in this context.
It's not just a guy feeling a little grumpy that his wife bought dinner.
No, not at all. The survey measures clinical markers: severe anxiety, persistent insomnia, a sense of worthlessness, and emotional withdrawal.
Wow.
And to be clear, this is true even after researchers controlled for age, education, and overall household wealth.
So it's not about the stress of being poor.
No, it's entirely about the relative status within the home.
And the distress scales with the income, doesn't it? The more she makes, the worse he feels.
It does.
If the wife earns 70% or more of the household income, the husband's risk of serious psychological distress doesn't just bump up. It skyrockets to 2.5 times as high.
2.5 times.
And you think, okay, maybe this is a generational thing. Maybe older guys who grew up in the 1950s are struggling with this, but younger couples in their 20s and 30s are figuring it out.
But the longitudinal data says no.
It really does. They split the sample into 2 distinct decades, 2001 to 2011 and 2013 to 2023.
And the relationship between female breadwinning and male distress remained virtually unchanged.
So a younger man today is just as likely to suffer psychological distress over his wife's income as his father was 20 years ago.
Which tells you exactly how deeply ingrained this psychological script is.
Yeah.
Society has fed men a narrative for centuries that their primary utility, their core value to a family, is financial provision.
Right.
When you remove that without replacing it with a new, equally respected purpose, you create a profound crisis of identity.
But it's absolutely crucial that we don't just frame this entire phenomenon as a crisis of male fragility.
No, because the costs of this dynamic are not borne by the husbands alone. Research consistently shows that breadwinning wives also report much lower satisfaction with their relationships.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We so often assume it's just the men feeling emasculated, sulking because they aren't the providers, and dragging the marriage down with their bad mood.
Right.
But what is this actually doing to the women who do out-earn their husbands? Why are they so unhappy when they're supposedly winning the economic game?
This raises an important question, and it requires us to look critically at how we interpret this entire phenomenon.
Because it's not just about the money.
Exactly. The article quotes Dr. Hegnes, who points out a glaring structural failure that often gets ignored when we just focus on male egos.
What does she say?
She notes that family work is still predominantly falling on women's shoulders, no matter whether they are the breadwinner or not.
Right. We have a term for this in sociology, the second shift.
The invisible labor. The mental load.
Precisely.
You have high-earning wives coming home from incredibly demanding, highly compensated jobs that require massive mental and physical energy.
Only to find they are still expected to act as the primary homemaker.
Yes. They are still the ones organizing the childcare, scheduling the pediatrician appointments, remembering the in-laws' birthdays, and doing the laundry.
It's the double burden. They're essentially working 2 full-time jobs. So the article frames this heavily around the pain of nonconformity and the male ego. But if a woman is bringing in 75% of the income, but still managing the entire household calendar and doing the dishes at 10 p.m.,
Right.
is the marital dissatisfaction really just about his bruised ego? Or is it stemming from a total failure of traditional domestic structures to adapt to a new economic reality?
It is undeniably a structural collapse. The economic reality has shifted. She is the provider, but the domestic reality hasn't budged an inch.
The husband hasn't stepped fully into the role of primary homemaker.
And largely because society doesn't offer a validated, respected script for men to do that.
That's true.
If a man tells his peers he is a stay-at-home dad or the primary homemaker, society still tends to view that with suspicion or mild pity.
So he avoids the domestic work to protect whatever masculinity he feels he has left.
Exactly. As a result, the woman is exhausted, burned out, and deeply resentful, while the man feels inadequate, displaced, and clinically distressed.
The traditional roles have completely failed them both, but neither has a roadmap for the alternative.
And that toxic combination of exhaustion and inadequacy is the exact recipe for that 30% higher divorce rate we saw in the French study.
That makes the data look entirely different. The failure of the domestic structure to adapt completely mirrors the persistence of traditional marital customs in general.
It really does.
We are so willing to modernize certain things, but we fiercely protect others.
Oh, yeah. Think about dating today.
Right. The old rules are totally faded. Very few couples today insist on marrying before they have sex.
Almost no one waits to move in together until they have a ring on their finger.
We abandoned those behavioral norms pretty easily because they were inconvenient.
But the symbolic customs of male dominance, those are apparently made of iron.
Men are still overwhelmingly expected to be the ones to propose.
And women are still overwhelmingly expected to erase their own surname and take their husband's names.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the ultimate testament to how sticky these traditional power dynamics are.
We desperately want the economic benefits of a dual-income modern household.
We want the bigger house and the nicer vacations that her salary provides.
But we are terrified of letting go of the patriarchal symbols that historically organized that household. We want modern wealth with 1950s optics.
Which brings us all the way back to the catalyst of our conversation, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
It really does bring it full circle.
Here you have a woman who is a literal billionaire. She is a global economic force who boosts the GDP of countries she tours in.
She is out-earning a highly successful, famous professional athlete by roughly 5 to 1.
She is the ultimate modern powerhouse. And yet, even at that stratospheric level of wealth and influence, the traditional scripts still assert themselves.
They really do. Tabloids are widely reporting that despite her immense financial dominance, she plans to legally adopt Mr. Kelce's surname when they marry.
Even if she continues to perform professionally as Taylor Swift.
It perfectly encapsulates the profound tension we've been discussing today. She can conquer the charts, she can dictate terms to the global economy, but the social expectation to signal traditional marital alignment, to show the world who the head of the household is symbolically, remains incredibly potent.
Her massive paychecks are revolutionary, but her adherence to the traditional script proves she remains the exception to a very stubborn rule.
And until our cultural ego actually catches up to our economic reality, until men feel genuinely secure contributing in ways other than financial, and women are actually relieved of the domestic double burden, that 50% cliff isn't going anywhere.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? As you watch women continue to vastly outpace men in university degrees, entering the workforce with more earning potential and ambition than ever before, what will the future of marriage actually look like if our cultural ego simply refuses to adapt to our economic reality? Will the breadwinner norm eventually break under the sheer weight of mathematical inevitability? Or will marriage rates simply plummet as women ultimately refuse to take on 2 full-time jobs just to protect a tradition that no longer serves them? Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.